This is Aaron Posner, everyone. He is an award-winning director, playwright, teacher, and the former artistic director of Philadelphia's Arden Theater and New Jersey's Two River Theater. He's directed more than 150 productions at major regional theaters across the country, including the DC area. As a playwright, he's written a reimagining of Chekhov's Seagull entitled Stupid Fucking Bird, which was one of the 10 most produced plays in the country in 2015. And he's had more than 150, that show has had more than 150 productions worldwide. Some of his other plays include The Heel, JQA, Life Sucks, No Sisters, District Merchants, Who Am I This Time, and Other Conundrums of Love, The Chosen, My Name is Asher Lev, The Gift of Nothing, The Dreams and Adventures of Young Jane Goodall, and many more. I'm Susan Evans. I'm the artistic director here, and I'm directing Uncle Vanya. And this is, in the middle here, Fran Smith. Fran is one of the founders of Live Arts and has directed over 60 shows here, I think. The last thing, over 60. And the last one was the Humans, I think, in 2020, right before the pandemic hit. And in the back row there is our executive director, Ann Hunter. So the first question that we had posed is, what inspired you to write Life Sucks and also your other Chekhov adjacent plays?
How do I answer this? A long time love-hate relationship with Chekhov, I suppose. Both totally admiring. I went to Northwestern University, where Chekhov was held up as sort of the be-all, end-all, the great of the greats. And anything that's held up in front of a young person that way as so nearly holy is something you have to sort of rebel against a little bit. So I loved Chekhov. Found most productions I saw of Chekhov far from satisfying, and also just the reality of Chekhov called a lot of interesting questions to me about, like, there was so much in it that I loved, but it also felt very old-fashioned and hard for people to relate to because the world had changed so much. There was something in it too that I don't think I could have articulated at the time about the fact that when Chekhov was writing, what he was doing was radical, was genius, was sort of shocking and new and different. And yet what that was, which was sort of complicated psychological realism, he won. He and Ibsen basically won the day, and everything has been following them for the last 130 years. And so Chekhov becomes old hat, not radical, and sort of, old and fussy and dust ridden, as opposed to shocking and utterly engaging. And so there was something pleasurable about the idea of being able to talk about some things that I really wanted to talk about life and love and theater, and to do that in relation to Chekhov, but hopefully, in a sense, trying to re-radicalize a little bit, to sort of say what would, and then I think maybe at the core of all of that was I really wanted to write plays that I wanted to see, and that I didn't really want to see the seagull again, but I wanted to talk about a lot of those things. And so that was the impulse behind writing Stupid Fucking Bird, which was quite a departure for me, because I had done a lot of adaptations that were very sort of straightforward adaptations of literature, but I'd never stepped into an arena like I did with but it was at a moment in my life where I thought, kind of literally, oh, fuck it, I'm going to write exactly what I want to write. Oh, sorry if you're recording this. Well, oh well. Well, although part of the reason of calling it Stupid Fucking Bird was sort of like, so don't tell me I can't say fuck, because I'm calling it Stupid Fucking Bird, and if you come and see that play, then you should know what you're in for. And then the reality of life. So that was sort of what led to Stupid Fucking Bird. The reality was, I wasn't sure when I wrote that play that anyone would ever do it. Was thrilled when Woolly Mammoth Theater offered me a completion commission to finish writing the play, because I hadn't finished it, and said they would produce it. But I had had such a great time writing it, and at that point I'd finished the play, but I still had months to go before we began rehearsal. I thought, this was so much fun, I want to do something else. And I started writing Life Sucks then, before Stupid Fucking Bird was ever performed. I didn't finish it, but I started it then, going like, I just want to keep going and do more of these. So that was where and if Siegel had been, there's in the same way that my daughter takes tests about which Harry Potter house, she and her friends belong to. You can do the same sort of psychological quiz with which is your favorite Chekhov play. So if the Siegel was my favorite Chekhov play as a young man, by the time I was writing these in my 40s, Uncle Vanya was my favorite. And so even having done Stupid Fucking Bird, I was really excited to jump into Vanya. And it is still a play that I feel very close to and very connected to. And I put a lot of myself into. So that was the impulse to write it, was just to continue the fun of sort of doing these wacky Chekhov adaptations.
Yes, that's what I would guess. And then No Sisters followed that, I guess.
No Sisters, which is its own weird, No Sisters works differently because it was such a crazy and probably stupid but interesting idea to do it in relation to Three Sisters. So, I mean, it's designed to run sort of like Alan Ayckbourn did with House and Garden. It's actually designed to be performed simultaneously with a production of Three Sisters, two different audiences in two different theaters in the same building at the same time, with 7 actors performing in both shows simultaneously. So what you're doing, which is, crazy enough and wonderful that you're doing the two in rep, this is even a more insane version of actually literally actors performing 2 plays for 2 different audiences at the same time.
Don't give me any ideas. So in Life Sucks, the actors break the fourth wall over and over again to talk to the audience. Can you talk a little bit about why that audience interaction is important in this play, and why you use that device a lot?
Well, in Stupid Fucking Bird, people break the fourth wall. In Life Sucks, I don't even think there is a fourth wall. I mean, I never sort of allowed the fourth wall to be built at all. So hence that prologue of going like, there is no fourth. So, I think I just quintessentially like the idea that actors are both fully invested in their characters and still know they're in a play at the same time. And I stole that pretty much wholesale from this guy whose work I've done quite a lot of, named Shakespeare, who I think is quite good. And there is always the sense in most of those, particularly in the comedies, but in a lot of the tragedies too, like people just sort of know they're in a play. They can talk to the audience whenever they want. Of course, you can do Shakespeare lots of different ways, but that's the way it's always felt to me. The felt that it really belonged in that kind of, that original Elizabethan setting where you could eat and drink and yell back at the stage, and this was it was a live happening rather than a please sit politely, quietly in your chairs and pay attention to our brilliance. And so, so most of my plays I like to live in the reality that, I think I've been saying this in one way or another for since I began in my career, but it's never been truer that, movies and television are so good. I mean, they're just so good. So many brilliant actors and brilliant authors writing brilliant stories with every visual effect you can possibly do. So the thing that we still have is that we're all in a room together, and that we all know we're all in a room together, and we're engaged in an act of art in collaboration or in tandem or in some kind of connected symbiotic relationship. And I love that. So therefore, I don't want a fourth wall. I want as few walls as possible, I think.
Well, in our Founders Theater, it's very intimate. So they're literally what, 1.5 feet maybe from the audience. Something
I love that. That's great.
One other thing that, I was familiar with Life Sucks, but I was watching the designer run through of it a little while ago, and I had forgotten how closely it tracks UNCLE VANYA scene by scene. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about your process when you're doing adaptations like this? And do you usually exactly track, or?
I've done so many different kinds of adaptations now, from really reverent versions of novels to, District Merchants, which follows Merchant of Venice, but doesn't really follow it in a scene by scene way, to I've done adaptations of Shaw where I've cut characters, and I've cut a ton of words. I've cut a quarter of the words, but it's still totally Shaw. it's interesting. The one I'm now working on Cherry Orchard, which will be my final Chekhov. And a decade of this has been plenty. So I'm doing my final Chekhov adaptation. I have a new Chekhov adaptation running in Wisconsin right now called Anton's Shorts, which is some of the short plays and vaudevilles, along with a Chekhov character in that. But the Cherry Orchard, which I'm calling the Cherry Tortured, is it's in a number of drafts. It actually follows the play less closely because I'm trying to ask it to subvert the play a little bit. I found with Stupid Fucking Bird and Life Sucks, I sort of started with the play and then found that I went a little further and further afield as it went on. But the project was always like, I love these plays. I love these characters, yet they feel old-fashioned. So I really just want to have it's sort of what I believe as a director, anyway, or as an acting teacher too. I mean, I want the actors to bring all of themselves. I want to bring all of myself, and I want Chekhov to bring all of himself as well. And that somewhere in the middle of that triangle or square or circle or whatever it is, there is a place where we can meet where no one has to get reduced, but the identity and energy and humanity of the actors and the designers and the director and the playwright can all find, hopefully, as strong a meeting point and as full an expression as possible. And so, yeah, I follow the plays pretty carefully because the fun for me is not like, what can I do that's better? I'll never do anything better than Chekhov. Chekhov was an incredible, shocking genius who changed the world of storytelling. But what can I bring of my own experience and of my own time and my own struggles that feels authentic or interesting?
Thank you. That's fascinating, actually.
Hi, Erin. I am Mimi Helpern, and I am Babs in Life Sucks. So, why Jews?
Right, what you know, I think. I couldn't tell you why Babs is Jewish and why that's the way it went. Part of it was part of the Jewish nature of this was because and Life Sucks actually used to be more Jewish than it is currently. And part of that was because it was a completion commission from Theater J in DC, and that's where we did the original production. So I leaned towards Jewishness. I'm exploring some of that in Cherry Orchard as well. I do think there is perhaps an interesting and complicated relationship between a Jewish sensibility and Chekhov's. There is something in the world of privilege and of a life examined and of maybe stuckness and of long sufferingness that feels, I am sure many other cultures and many other peoples and just people in the world can talk about those connections to those things, because I think it certainly transcends any particular group. But there is something pretty Jewish that feels like a pretty good connection with both my understanding of Chekhov and I think Chekhov's worlds.
Vanya says, in Judaism, it is your action that counts, not what you say. But Chekhov lived in a country where Jews were being oppressed at the time significantly. So that's why it's kind of interesting to set Chekhov, or the concepts that he was writing, in a very Jewish play. I mean, everybody really in Life Sucks is Jewish, really.
They feel Jewish, yeah. I didn't think about that. I mean, I didn't think about what did I know about the oppression in Russia of Jews? Of course. Did I think about the fact that, but again, for me, it's about a marriage across time. So I am taking what I'm interested in Chekhov is his core understanding of human beings. When it comes right down to it, as interesting or theoretically interesting as I find sociology and politics and even anthropology, I'm interested in psychology and in emotion and in human beings struggling through their days, which is just what Chekhov was interested in. my favorite quote of his being, right, any idiot can withstand a crisis. It's this day-to-day living that wears us all out. And that idea that, like, you know what, we're all just people doing the best we can and making a mess of it most of the time. And does that have a Jewish sensibility? Yes, but it just mostly has a human sensibility. He was profoundly not interested in villains in a way that I am not interested in villains. So there's just a lot, I find, I didn't even know this so much, but I have learned over this decade how much I resonate with Chekhov's sensibility, and how he has helped me understand myself and the world better. And so the Jewish nature of Life Sucks was really just my marrying myself and my sensibility to his.
Thank you.
And I will add that in Vanya, over and over again, is the refrain, there are deeds to be done, we need to work, and it's actions that mean something. So I think that that's sort of echoed in Life Sucks.
Hi, Erin, I'm Elizabeth, and I'm playing Ella. And yeah, I was just curious if you could talk a little bit about your process in developing that character. I find her to be a departure from Yelena, and I know part of that is obviously this is a modern story, but I was just curious if you could talk about kind of the development of that character.
Yeah, it was the hardest for me. The one I tend to feel quite close to a lot of my characters, in that I imbue them with a lot of my own complexity, if we want to say, we'll say it nicely, my own issues, my own struggles, my own things. The Ella is a character that I felt very little connection with, and my first drafts of her were sort of very much Yelena, were very straight from the Chekhov, which was not very interesting to a number of my friends who read it, and particularly to my wife, who said, "What are you doing? And how is that interesting to us now?" And in conversation with her, but also with a number of other friends of mine, I ended up doing more research about Ella than anything else, and had a number of interesting conversations, talking to women and colleagues that felt close to her struggles, that felt that they could identify with her in interesting ways. And so she was much more, she came out of conversation and out of research much more than out of me in some ways. I've been very gratified in talking to a number of people who have played her over the years, that felt like, I don't know, that at least I got some things right, because it was much more, it was just much more research based.
Hi, my name is Lyra McKee. I am playing Sonia, and I have a character related question as well. So the idea was brought up today of doing a short promo video with Sonia from Life Sucks and Sonia from UNCLE VANYA. So I was thinking about how to talk about Sonia in Life Sucks, and I feel like she is very caring, very kind, very empathetic, but most of the time she shines those qualities on other people as opposed to herself, at least at first. And then, like in Act 2, it seems like her sort of despair over the doctor and her unrequited love and her self-image causes her to lash out at Ella in a way that it seems very out of character for her. Looking at the trajectories of the other characters, I feel like maybe Sonia is the most different in her worldview at the end from where she is at the beginning, because she's obsessing over the doctor, and then she says at the end of Act 2, life sucks. And then at the end of the play, when Bonnie says life sucks, she says, no, it doesn't, and is very insistent that life does not suck after talking to Babs and making friends with Ella and stuff.
I think you're very right. I do feel like in some ways, interesting characters will sometimes emerge. If you had told me that Sonia would end up being the center of the play in some ways, I would have been very surprised. But I do feel like that's actually happening in Cherry Orchard. That's happening with Varya, another character that I would never have sort of thought would be the center of my production of Cherry Orchard. But that's just sort of what's emerging, and it has to do with growth and change. I think Sonia in some way in Life Sucks is a sort of precursor to what I'm trying to do overall with Cherry Orchard, which is, if the sort of hallmark of Chekhov characters is that they are stuck in something, and at the end of the play, they're still stuck. Like that, like they might have an idea or they might have a hope, but they don't get to Moscow and they don't actually go to work. And they don't, maybe they do, but we're hoping for them in the future, but they do, there is still a lot of stuckness. But Sonia, I do think, has found a way to move forward, and I am trying to give the people in Cherry Orchard, I'm trying to unstick them from their play, and that's a project that is taking me further and further away from the original, because Chekhov left them in the muck, more or less. So I agree with what you're saying, and I do think that that's I hope you enjoy the journey, and congratulations on getting to a better place at the end.
Thanks, I love it. And yeah, I just think it's so interesting in comparison to the way Sonia ends up in Vanya.
Well, when Susan gave me this script, I went, this guy's having a lot of fun writing this thing, and I can see it. I can almost picture you. Do you write it by hand or on the computer?
It's on the list of things that I felt like if I was a real playwright, I would write it all by hand on yellow legal pads, usually by a lake someplace. But no, I write on trains and planes and very early in the morning, and always on a computer. I don't write it with a.
Smiling at yourself as you typed through some of these scenes. I really, really had fun with this and loved it immediately. I also, as a director, love the fact that it's 1.2, 1.3, all the scenes are broken down so that you can rehearse it with people on certain nights. It's not just tactically.
Another thing I stole sort of from Shakespeare, Shakespeare is sort of embedded in almost everything I do in one way or another. And when I started directing Shakespeare, I started not doing sort of act 1, scene 3, but I just would do a list of, there's about 35 or so individual scenes in Shakespeare, and sort of listing and naming them all. So I do that for everything I write, because it just helps me help get my mind around the play.
And I love the fact of the fourth wall. We won't call it the fourth wall, but the openness of the cast with the audience, because I know in a lot of scenes, even though it's not directed at the audience, we throw some asides to the audience, like don't Google it. We had a lot of fun with it, and yeah, I'm excited to see how it all comes out, because Vanya is so dressed, and Life Sucks is not. It has a table and a stair, a step to sit on. So it's pretty simple, and I'm really excited about it.
Well, good luck. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, breaking the fourth wall is a good challenge for actors too. How to control them, how far do you take them? We'll have to experience that with an audience, of course.
Yeah, it's hard when the last member of the cast doesn't show up until the first preview. Or final dress rehearsal, because it is harder for actors, and of course I found some actors wonderful. I know wonderful actors who really love it, who love that challenge and the liveness of being in relation to audiences, and others that just can't stand it. Really, really, so I think it's just very much individual taste, but I love the liveness that is available in embracing that relationship.
Go so far, and then you have 3 things that I love or 3 things that I hate. I love those little breakups. And thank you for Pickles. I have to say, we cast Pickles a lot younger than you predicted, because, well, she was really good and we didn't have another one. So, but she is just such a great piece of comic relief. I love her. So.
My daughter, who's only 12, she loves Pickles too. So maybe it doesn't. Probably a little young to play it, but Pickles transcends. So
going back to something you were talking about earlier, what is your wife's role in the development of your new scripts?
My wife's role, she reads and helps and is honest with me. My wife has been an incredibly important part of she's a wonderful actor and winner of many awards, and she's just a wonderful actor and a theater educator. But she's been the single most important person to me on my journey of trying to grow and mature and get better and kinder and more helpful as a theater artist, because it's a tricky business, and very few people, particularly, I was in enviable / unenviable position of I started a theater when I was 24. So I've been an artistic director or director or playwright. And when you're in any kind of position of power, people aren't necessarily eager to tell you the truth. And a wife is a wonderful thing to have if you actually want to continue to grow and evolve and have somebody tell you the unvarnished truth about what you've written, what you've directed, what you're doing, how you're behaving. So she has been a guide and just a tremendous help to me at every step of the way.
Hi, Aaron. I'm Sean McCord. I play the professor in Life Sucks. Recognizing that Chekhov had his own way of writing plays. He did not write well-made plays. Do you think, who was the protagonist of Uncle Vanya? Or does Uncle Vanya have a protagonist? And if so, who is the protagonist of Life Sucks?
That's a really, really fair and legitimate question that and I am now a theater professor, I should be able to answer. And if any of my students watch this in the future, I can answer this question. I just choose not to. I don't tend to think in those terms, although I think we just talked about it with Sonia a little bit, because I do think you can make the argument clearly that whoever grows and changes the most is often the protagonist. Chekhov, I think, also was not thinking, they are such ensemble pieces, and where you get on board depends on where you live. I mean, I was just saying to someone, they just did a production of Life Sucks at the Dobama Theater in Cleveland a year or two ago. And a friend of mine from college played the professor. And I had a moment where I was like, this is a friend of mine from college. He's only 2 years older than me. He can't play oh darn. I'm almost old enough to play the professor now, which was a shock to me because I felt much more Vanya-y when I wrote it. But I do think that for all kinds of audiences, you can, part of what's wonderful, like, again, I'm just going to go there again, like Shakespeare, an ensemble like this gives you so many different places to get on board, because people will get in through the love story, or they'll get in through the social reality, or they'll get in through, people might get in through Babs or through Sonia or through anyone else. So I don't think it's really about a protagonist. It's about a world and a kind of, and the sort of the collisions of human beings as they try and muddle through.
That's actually the answer I was looking for.
Oh, great. Well,
now,
then,
if I were teaching this in a class, I could argue that Sonia is the protagonist because Vanya is literally her Uncle Vanya, and that's the title of the play, and so it's being told from her perspective. But walking in, I could see that these are many multiple interwoven stories, and the whole thing would fall apart if you took one thread out.
Hi, Aaron. My name is Eamon Hyland. I play Vanya in Life Sucks. I had a simple question, or seems like a simple question. How much of a how solipsistic do you feel that Vanya is? I feel that he spends a lot of time in his speeches kind of oscillating in and out of a very inwardly focused space.
Yeah. He's not very happy, and when we're not very happy, we spend a lot of time thinking about ourselves. There's in No Sisters, Natasha does a whole thing about how she thinks that people are so shellfish, because she when she was young, she misheard the word and she thought it was shellfish instead of selfish, and I do think a lot about shellfishness. I do think that when people are as philosophical and inward focused as many of the people are in Chekhov's plays, sure, they feel they would be happier if they could get their focus off themselves and out into the world and into work and into each other and that's where. That's a journey that happens in Stupid Fucking Bird that doesn't happen in The Seagull, where actually Masha, or the Mosh character in Medvedenko, Dev, are actually pretty happy and do okay because they have kids and they figure out a way to move forward, which is to have a family and to actually find forward momentum through, because, you know, kids are a pretty good way of getting your focus off yourself, at least, you know. So I don't love the idea of thinking of him as quintessentially somebody who has been or always will be self-focused or selfish, because I think that for those of us who fall into that or who have those tendencies, it's not who we want to be, it's not where we want to stay, it's just sometimes where we get stuck.
Hi, I'm Madison Michael. I'm the marketing coordinator here at Live Arts. You were talking about earlier how you have a lot of connection with Uncle Vanya, like as a person. I was curious if there's a character you're related to most and what some of those areas you connect with it are.
Yeah, Vanya, Aster, the professor, Babs, Pickles. No, there are such, I think of people like John Irving, who are such great novelists that they can write whole worlds of people that can't possibly all be themselves because they are writing from such rich imaginative. Yeah, I'm just not that good a writer. So I mostly write versions of myself over and over again. And I feel quite close to most of them. Again, I suppose Ella is the furthest, but other than her, I mean, I feel very connected to Sonia and very connected to Babs and to Pickles and to really all of them. You know, it's more about the fact that this play, in many ways, and again, this is almost 10 years ago that I was writing this, and I've revised it a little bit as we go, but most of the impulse of it was nearly 10 years ago. It was sort of how the world was feeling to me at that time, and me in the world. And right as I've been working on Cherry Orchard for years and years, the world has been changing so much. The play has been changing so much. And the way I feel the world and live in relation to the world is continually changing so much. So I'm finding it kind of a moving target that's hard. I'm trying, I make that joke, but I do think it's true. I have friends who are such great structural writers who write with such care and meticulous and so beautifully put together. I am more vomitous. I just put out all the things that are bothering me and are hurting me, or that I'm finding difficult, or that I'm struggling with, and I'm curious to see how those will bounce around with each other and in the world. And Chekhov has given me a wonderful playground in which to do that. So I feel pretty close to pretty much everyone in one way or another.
I think one of the reasons I was drawn to this is, like you, my trajectory through Chekhov is as he matured and I matured, that's why I land on Cherry Orchard, because that is his masterpiece. You know, it was a year before he died, and his play sort of tracked his own relations to his own life. And I never really cared for Seagull very much when I was reading it. And Uncle Vanya is sort of in the middle there, which I find it a midlife crisis play in a certain kind of way. And what I loved about Life Sucks is that I felt it was so loving. You didn't, to me, parody it in any way, but simply blowing things up and, like you say, contemporizing it so that it's really, really accessible. But in terms of what the characters are going through, it's exactly the same to me as what they were going through in Vanya. So that's what I love about it. I guess I just wanted to communicate.
I appreciate that so much. And you know, there are great authors out there who write with some distance or even contempt for their characters, and authors who I think are brilliant. But you know, more in the sort of Philip Roth world. But like my favorites, the Kurt Vonnegut's and Chaim Potok and Chekhov and Shakespeare, I would say, are writing with love, with real love, and not turning a blind eye to the flaws of their people, but loving them despite, maybe because of their faults and their flaws and their sort of broken humanity. And so that's where I'm drawn. And so I hope that it feels loving, because I love all of these people, because you know, because I think they're trying their best.
Yeah, I'm Jim Horscott. I'm the stage manager. And my wife and I have seen a bunch of your plays, Chicago, Theater J, and Folger and
Oh,
things.
wow. Thank you.
And the question's about sense of place. I mean, in Uncle Vanya, it's clearly set in a Russian household. There's, you know, samovars and all kinds of stuff. In your Theater J production, they had a full set. Here we're doing it very spare, which I think works great. So and basically allows, between that and the lack of a fourth wall, it just allows it to be about the people somewhere. And I was just wondering whether that was, you thought along those lines at all, and whether that was intentional at all.
Maybe it's because I started a theater from scratch with no money and no resources in a little black box a million years ago. I do tend to start always from the idea of like, why not nothing? Why not half a dozen chairs on an empty stage? And why not that? And I think there's lots of, and I've done some productions that are, you know, huge sets and huge things, but those were hopefully there for a good reason, because those were required for the telling of that story. I saw a very beautiful, I only saw it on video. I wouldn't have thought it was possible, but I saw a video production of it in Montreal of Stupid Fucking Bird in French. So I couldn't, I followed some of it, you know, on a completely bare stage. They did it absolutely bare stage. They had a line. Literally, it was a black floor with a single line across it, and that was the entire set. And as I started watching it, I was like, I don't even know how this is going to work, but I thought it worked very beautifully. I've seen a video of a production in Luxembourg that took place in a fake empty swimming pool with everybody in bait. So, you know, you can go a lot of different places with it. But I do, again, as I said earlier, I mean, this sort of validates it. Like, I'm really interested in the human heart and in the relationships and in how these people bounce off of each other. And as long as there's some place for them to stand and sit and we can see them, I think that's what matters. So a very spare, bare bones production sounds to me like a terrific idea.
Can I just say, I love the ending when Vanya said, people of the cast, what do you want? And he said, I want to be loved by everybody. Just who that almost makes me tear up every time I see that. It's a very wonderful way to end it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's very Jewish. I think maybe it's very Jewish.
We wish you could come join us and see the shows, but we'll have you in our thoughts. And thank you so much for this interview. We really appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. I wish you the very, very best of luck with things. I hope it goes wonderfully well.
Thank you so much, Aaron.
Thank you.
Goodbye for now.
Bye-bye.